Hi, friends. As we wrap up the first quarter of 2024, of course, now there's a chance to look back at 2023 and ask some questions about what went on in the tabletop hobby space. And so we're going to get to that in just a second. But first, of course, I'd like to remind you that this video is brought to you by our friends at Hellebarde Games. Hellebarde makes the kind of adventures they'd like to play, whether it's for Castles and Crusades, for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, or for the OSR. Old School is in play at the table with Hellebarde Games, and you can find them on DriveThruRPG or on their website, hellebardegames.com, and I will link to them in the description below. You should absolutely check them out. So with that said, let's have a quick gander. Now, these are a couple of articles that come to us from ICV2, and of course I will link to those as well. And they talk about how the hobby game market actually did. And I think this is fairly all-encompassing for all of us, whether we're talking about somebody like me who does fairly kitchen sink level work, or even a big, huge company like Wizards of the Coast. This entails that in its entirety. So let's take a look at the ICV2 article and see what they've got to say. And there's another article that we're also going to take a look at because I think it plays into this a little bit. So let's hop over there. So this says, hobby game sales eke out a tough win in 2023, holding on to human malware gains. And this is by Milton Grape. This was back on the 28th. Hobby game sales eked out a nominal 1% increase in 2023 against the tough comparison to a third great year of fueled sales in 2022. Increases in collectible game and miniature sales offset declines in board, card, and RPG sales. Now note that declines in RPG sales. We define hobby games as those produced for a gamer market, generally, although not always, sold primarily in the hobby channel of game and card specialty stores. We define hobby games market as the market for those games, regardless of whether they're sold in the hobby channel or other channels. Our estimates include sales in the US and Canada. The total hobby games market estimate is derived from estimates for 5 individual categories: collectible games, which include trading collectible card games, collectible miniatures and other collectible formats, miniatures, board games, card and dice games, and role-playing games. Our primary means of collecting data about hobby games sales is interviews with key industry figures with good visibility to sales in various subcategories and channels. We also review data released by publicly traded companies, publicly available Circana data, and crowdfunding data and analysis. And that last bit, of course, is pretty important because, again, a lot of people down kind of on the small creative end of the pool, that is their primary outlet, is crowdfunding, whether it's through Indiegogo. Some people even do GoFundMe. Others, of course, go through systems like Patreon. But let's continue. For the full ICV2 white paper presentation, and then they've got a couple links to that for last year's report. See hobby sales up 7%. 2023 trends. We estimate hobby game sales in the US and Canada at around $2.885 billion for 2023, up around 1% from sales in 2022. While the nominal increase was less than the rate of inflation, holding at the previous year's sales levels was an impressive performance for a market that had gone up a total of 70% in the previous 3 years. And again, they mention, of course, the human malware that struck us all. I have to be careful about saying that because of YouTube guidelines. But, when everybody was behind closed doors and you were looking for something fun to do that didn't involve being able to go out, something like a card game, a board game, a miniatures game, or indeed a role playing game, things like that could be key. So, of course, that saw a huge boom, as did computer gaming, whether it was portable video gaming on a thing like, like a Nintendo Switch or a Steam Deck. Console gaming, Xbox and PS5 had notorious shortages, not just due to supply chain issues, but due to demand. And of course, PC gaming, which was its own mess back then. Consumers continued to buy despite the absence of government stimulus, prices that had gone up pretty dramatically over the previous 2 years, surging out of home dining and entertainment, and revenge travel on an impressive scale. Revenge travel, I like that one. Sounds like something that should be in D&D, right? I cast revenge travel. But then, as we've noted in the past, the American consumer is a tough beast to bring down. USA. Publishers' product proliferation was the name of the game at the publisher level, as a shortening of development and manufacturing pipelines brought delayed products into the market and allowed new products to flow relatively smoothly. The second year since the release of malware vaccines and treatments brought store traffic fully back to pre-malware levels or above, but retailers had to navigate costs that were markedly higher than the year before, especially for labor and rent. Despite these challenges, hobby game retailers ended the year in relatively healthy shape, distributors told us. Store counts were reported as flat to up. Well, that's good news. FLGS is not only not closing notably, but opening a little bit. Sales in the hobby channel were up a modest 2%, despite declines in some categories. This made 2024 the 15th consecutive year of growth in the channel, with a huge surge in the 20s. A look by category. Collectibles and miniatures were the only two 2023 growth categories. Board games, card games, and role-playing games were all down. Although there were differences by product, sales of lifestyle gamer products generally held up better than those appealing to more casual consumers. Parry that, you casuals. The dominance of collectible games as a category continued in 2023. It is over half of hobby game sales, larger than the other four categories combined. Watch for our category by category trend analysis over the coming days. We have an in-depth analysis of the trend above on the ICV2 Pro site. Unfortunately, I don't have the ICV Pro, but let's take a quick look, see if this chart will open for us. And there we go. It's a fairly simple chart, but we can see, up. It was up, and it grew 2%. I mean, 2015 and 2021 obviously were the largest. So let's take a look at the other article, and then I want to share my thoughts about this. So this was miniatures, the strongest hobby games category in 2023, based on growth rate, also by Milton Grebe, and I again will link to this article below. Based on growth rate, non-collectible miniatures and miniature games were the strongest hobby games category in 2023, up around 9% from 525 million to 570 million, according to ICV2 estimates. Collectible games was the only other category to book a win, and it was only up around 3%, while the other three hobby game categories were all down for the year. And then, of course, they talk about Games Workshop led the way, sales up around 15% in North America. The launch of a new edition of Warhammer 40,000, announced a year ago to Adepticon, was the biggest driver. It kicked off with a bang behind a $250 box set. The biggest obstacle to better Games Workshop sales are all self-inflicted, we heard in our interviews. Backlist fill rates are not high enough. Retailers seem to be getting what they order from Games Workshop on most new releases. Distributors continue to be heavily allocated. A bigger problem cited by both retailers and distributors was the shortening of the pre-order cycle, making it extremely difficult to gather demand in time for initial orders to Games Workshop. Pre-order info reaches Games Workshop customers on Sundays, and orders are due 2 days later. Ouch, that is a brutal cycle. The frenzy for WizKids Dungeons & Dragons miniatures cooled along with sales of the RPG. Stick a pin in that, fans. Battletech sales increased the fastest of non-GW lines in 2023, with the continued availability of the beginner box a big driver for customer acquisition. Atomic Mass Games titles are doing well. Marvel Crisis Protocol was up year over year behind the release of a new core set and increased SKU counts. Star Wars Shatterpoint had a successful launch, bringing to new life to the Star Wars franchise for the company. And then, of course, they have the miniatures, the strongest category, in depth. Again, that's on the paywall side. And then they have the article that we just talked about. So let's talk about this a little bit. I find it interesting that 2023 was not a banger year, and I can't help but wonder. One cannot help but wonder if it was not, in fact, the OGL debacle playing into that a little bit. Did a drop in sales of Dungeons and Dragons drag down all of TTRPGs? Now, we all saw, and I did a video on this, that many smaller companies saw their sales surge as people quit Hasbro / Wizards of the Coast in droves over their mishandling of the open gaming license and many other PR bungles that happened throughout 2023. But was it in fact the other way? Did overall dismal performance by Wizards of the Coast impact other creators in such a way that even though in the overall they were increasing, it was not enough to backfill the damage that was done by a down Wizards of the Coast? I think it could be. I definitely think it could be. And it's going to be interesting to come back and revisit this in the first quarter of 2025 when we look back in 2024, which of course will mark the release of a new edition of Dungeons & Dragons. This, of course, is the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons, no matter how little Wizards of the Coast may like that. But ultimately, of course, I want to know what you guys think about it. So let me know in the comments below. What do you think happened? Did you witness this? Do you work at a brick and mortar store? Are you a small developer? How did your sales do? Or how did you observe sales out there? And of course, if you haven't already, please do click the subscribe button, click the bell icon for notifications. It helps a lot. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below and tell me what you liked about it, and I'll do more of it. I've got more videos coming, guys. Of course, RPG news, views, rants, that sort of thing. Live streams 5 nights a week. So thank you very much for watching this. And until next time, keep your eye on the bottom line, guys. Peace.